Hey guys, it's Megan from Made for Mermaids, and today I'm doing a video on picot elastic. So this is that pretty little edge you see on your lingerie, on the band, and on the armholes and necklines of lingerie. And I'm going to show you a few different ways to attach it. So first let's talk about the picot elastic. Now I like to get for my lingerie a plush elastic. Let's see if you can tell in a different color. I don't think you're able to tell. But one side is very soft and then the other side has the elastic. So I like to get plush back elastic for most of my lingerie sewing, especially bras when it's going to be, you know, on delicate places. You want it to feel nice. You can get picot elastic that's not plush back. So it's just the elastic on both sides. And you can get this in tons and tons of colors. So it just depends on your preference. I do prefer the plush back, especially for bras. So this comes in different widths. This one is a band elastic, and then you can also get the smaller 3/8 inch, and that's for the neckline and the armhole elastic. So the band elastic you can find in 3/4, you can find in 1/2 inch. I like to use 1/2 inch, but you can get whatever you prefer. Now I'm going to show you a few different ways to attach it. I'm going to show you how to use my machine. You can attach it with your serger, and I'm going to show you why I prefer my machine. When you attach it with your serger and you fold it over, you're going to have a wider edge. You're going to have that space where it's not just the pretty picot edge just barely poking out, because your serger can't get that close to the elastic because it only has the 1/4 inch seam. So you can see here I finished this one with a cover stitch and serger. Let's see if it'll... And you can see there's a little bit more of the elastic showing and not just the picot edge. Now that's perfectly fine. If you want to use your serger and cover stitch or just your serger, no big deal. Just know that's why you're going to have that little extra edge, because you can't, unless you're going to cut the elastic off, which I don't know about your serger. My serger is not going to do that. It'll just eat it up. And you're also only using a 1/4 inch seam here instead of the 3/8 inch seam. So you're going to get a little bit of a different fit and width on your cup, on your underwear, on everything. So I'm going to show you how to use my machine. That's why I don't use my serger. And we're going to get started. Okay, so let's talk about first the measurement you want your elastic. So there's no measurements in the tutorial, because the same thing as the fold over elastic, if you watch that video, all picot elastic has different, there's different qualities of stretch and how tight it is, how much it pulls, depends on what kind of fabric you're using. So what I recommend to do is, I'll show you on the straight edge first, you're just going to cut your piece of elastic the size, or leave yourself a little bit of a tail of your edge that you're finishing. So your cup edge, your armhole, cut the elastic the same or just a little bit longer, leaving your tail. And that's going to give you some room so you can start it off the edge, and gives you a little room to play around with. And that way, some elastics are super tight. If you pull them just a little bit, it's going to gather your fabric, which you don't want. And then the other side is, this elastic is so much looser. You can see this one stretches way more than that one stretches. This one could stretch so much, where this one is a lot tighter. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay your elastic plush side up, if you're using the plush side, and you want the raw edges together. So the straight edge of the elastic with the raw edge of the fabric, you want it as close together as you can. And I like to use, again, a 3-step zigzag. For this step you can use whatever stretch stitch that you like. That one's my favorite. So I have a little bit of a tail, and you want to stitch as close to this picot edge as possible. So that this is a 3/8 inch elastic and there's a 3/8 inch seam. So I'm gonna stitch right down and keeping my needle, the zigzag edge, very close to the picot edge. That will ensure when you flip it and fold it again that only this pretty little edge is showing and you won't have any of the extra elastic. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a tail to get started. Again, I have a 3-step zigzag on here. Now once I get started, I'm again working in very small sections, so I only like to work in about 3 to 4 inch sections. I'm going to take my elastic and slightly pull it taut. Again, you don't want to pull it really tight because that is going to gather your fabric. You don't want to have it one-to-one because when this is finished, it will not hug your body the way you want it. So you're just very slightly putting a little bit of tension on it and stitching. Now you can see what I end up with is I did trim this a little bit, or I did cut my elastic a little bit longer, but you can see I have a bigger tail over here from pulling it taut. So I'm just going to trim that a little bit. Excuse me. Now what you want to do on the back, you can see I have a little bit of extra fabric right here. If you do, you want to trim that off, and that's just so your seam isn't bulky. So just quickly trim that off, any excess fabric that you have. And if you have a little bit, it's okay. Like, it's not, this isn't going to ruin your project, ruin your bra. You just want to trim it. If you left it there, then that seam is going to be a little bit thicker and a little bit more uncomfortable. So you want to trim it straight to the seam line. Okay, just like that. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take it back to your machine and you're going to flip the elastic towards the back, and we're going to again do a stitching line, slightly pulling the elastic taut. So you can see it's not gathered, but the fabric isn't laying straight. So if we just sewed it like this without pulling the elastic taut, your elastic would be a little floppy. You want to pull it a little bit taut, just like that, so your fabric is straight. Now I'm using the same stitch, 3-step zigzag. Again, you can use your cover stitch to do this, or your favorite stretch stitch. Whatever you want to use is fine. So pulling the elastic taut again, making sure the fabric is nice and flat. So on the back you will have your 2 rows of stitching from the first stitch and then from the top stitch. Just like that. Okay, so now we're going to attach the elastic to a curved edge like it was a bra cup. So again, I'm going to cut the elastic about the measurement of the edge we're applying it to. And I'm going to have the plush side of the elastic up, and I'm going to put the raw edges of the fabric and the elastic together and stitch this down as close to that picot as possible. So I gave myself a little tail again to start. Now slightly pulling the elastic taut, trying to keep the edge of the elastic and the edge of the fabric together. If you're using delicate fabrics, it can be difficult because they move around, so just work like I'm showing in small sections. Okay. So now we're gonna again flip it over, trim this excess fabric down. We have any over here, but I like to get it all so the seam is not thick, especially when you have several layers of lining, or if you did an inner lining, then you want to trim it down as much as you can so it's not too thick. And that'll just lay nicer, especially on the curved edge. So now we have it all trimmed, and we'll flip and stitch again, making sure our fabric is nice and flat. So now we have that nice little edge peeking out just like that. And again, you'll have the 2 lines of stitching on the back and 1 on the front, like so. There was the curved edge, and then there was the straight edge. And then this is what it should look like applied to your lingerie. So you just have that tiniest little pretty edge peeking out, and you can do this in all sorts of colors, and it looks really pretty. Now on the band, when you stitch the band, just like you stitched the thinner picot, you want to stitch right next to the edge of the, or as close as possible to that picot edge as possible, and then you would trim your seam down so you don't have any extra bulk, and then flip it over and stitch again. There we go. If you guys have any questions, please leave them below or ask in our Facebook group, and let me know if these tips helped you. I would love to see if you sew any of our patterns. We'll see you later. Bye.